Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. This platform brings you the most up-to-date, groundbreaking information from some of the best minds within the natural products industry, as well as voices from outside the industry. Let's face it, in my mind, everybody has something wonderful and great to share. And I feel that information and tips and beneficial ideas can come from everywhere. So if you like what I'm doing, leave me a subscribe, leave me a thank you note, leave me something, let me know you're listening because I want to make sure I'm getting the message out. And we want to make sure that we're growing the channel, my YouTube channel, so that all of these wonderful guests are getting the attention and the focus that they are due, because I'm bringing you an amazing lineup. So I want you to make sure that you're able to benefit from their wonderful words of wisdom. Today, my guest is Asa Waldstein, industry icon. I call him a regulatory god because what he does is very, very important. And you can see from the description of the program, he has incredible talent and an amazing career that he's had so far. And of course, amazing things upcoming. Help me welcome my guest. Asa, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. This is my kind of conversation, talking about natural health, regulations. I mean, I don't know if I'd call myself a regulatory god. That'd be a lot, but I'm a regulatory geek. I love enforcement trends, but really at the bottom of it, I'm really just a marketer at heart. We have to be able to talk about our products in a way that's truthful, not misleading, but also effective. Of course, that's how we get our health-giving products to the masses.
You know, it's interesting. I remember when DSHEA, because I've been in the industry for so long, I remember when DSHEA came about. I remember when it became a thing, and it became something that we actually needed to and should pay attention to. Now, it's been over 30 years. And during that 30 years, I think a lot of us that initially knew the importance of DSHEA, things may have slacked off a little bit. I think there's many, many people that have come and gone in the industry since DSHEA appeared. And many of them were maybe never taught, maybe never informed, maybe never educated on it. And there are people out there that are not paying attention. So my whole idea behind this interview today is, number one, to spotlight you and what you do, but also for people to learn maybe some tips on what we can say, what we could say, what we should say, what we shouldn't say. And I also want to lead the whole thing with saying it is very easy to be into a very passionate conversation and for things to just come out. And sometimes there's no backing up. You have to kind of circle around because I talk for a living. And sometimes I have crossed the line, fallen over the cliff. I've done it. I admit it. I catch myself. I try to learn from it. And then I try to stay within the parameters that are best for us to be able to follow. So kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Wherever you'd like to start, my friend.
Okay, well, how do we talk about our products? Should we jump in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see. Well, I'm an herbalist, so kind of going way back in time. I have a clinical herbalism background, and in the herbal world, before you go wildcrafting, before you go pick any plants, you should know the plants that are going to get you sick. I live in Colorado. We have hemlock, that type of thing. So with marketing compliance and how do we talk about our products, the twisted analogy here is, before we market a product, we should know what can get us in trouble, what pitfalls to avoid. With the herbalist analogy, it's what plants can get us sick, to kind of weave the herbalism into this conversation. So knowing what can get us in trouble is really the best way to inform compliant marketing. Of course, I write Morning Letter Wednesday, my weekly regulatory post. I've been doing it every week for 222 weeks in a row. It means I love it and I'm insane, but I'm also a total regulatory geek. I love it. One of the things I love about it is reading between the lines of what's happening in the enforcement world. But there's a couple general rules that I always like to start off with when I'm talking about what we can say. First, we'll start with what we can't say. So those are mostly disease claims. So with disease claims, anything ending in itis, you're a doc, you know this. Itis means inflammation of, such as arthritis. Those would be words we'd want to stay away from in our product or ingredient marketing. most items with anti in the title, other than antioxidant and maybe anti-aging, if it's got anti in the title, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, anti-tumor, kind of risk ladder goes up. Those are some things that we certainly want to avoid. And, I also wanted to bring up syndromes. I'm going to be speaking at a microbiome conference just around the corner, and we're going to be talking a lot about gut health. And we also talk a lot about irritable bowel syndrome in this kind of microbiome health world. But syndromes are actually considered disease or disease adjacent in the eyes of the FDA. So those are a few general rules of what I like to think about. And you're also a doc, so there's something called the ICD, or the International Classification of Diseases Code. If it has an ICD code, it's most likely to be considered a disease because it's got disease in the word there. So I'll just start with those kind of high level parameters.
Well, and I think sometimes, maybe more than none, people just don't have the versatility of the language or know what words can be inserted into what they're trying to say. And I think when they learn that there are other words that you can use that still get the point across, I think it's easy. I think we've gotten very comfortable with words. And we don't realize that there are many, many versions of those same word that we can use safely, legally, and to the point, honestly.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I like to do is look at the demographic and the type of customer that if we have a herbal product or an ingredient, who are the customers? The more playful the audience, the more fun you could have with it. So obviously we're not going to talk about insomnia, but we could maybe put a hashtag feel refreshed, or we're not going to say antidepressant, but maybe we could say hashtag smiles for days. And you could kind of have some fun with it. As long as we're being truthful, not misleading, you can kind of help wordsmith it, is what I call. So I think, discomfort, soothing, these are kind of common swap outs for words like pain or anti-inflammatory.
And I love that because, not only does it make the conversation a little bit more engaging, it also allows people to insert themselves into the conversation. And I think that's really important, because if we can see or feel ourselves in the conversation that we're listening to or having, it's a lot better. We walk away with answers, but we also walk away with less confusion. And I think confusion is one of the things that really just, what's interesting. I was doing an interview a couple weeks ago, and the person, I did not know them very well, but they had a very good reputation. And we came on, and she was so fearful of saying something incorrectly that the conversation was really, really, it was non-committal on her side with everything. And I said, we can go into a little bit more detail with these. And I tried to loosen her up with some of the synonyms, like you were saying. And then she kind of got a little bit more comfortable. I said, there are no words, and there are definitely no words. And there are words that are and then there are safe words. I said, let's just keep it on the safe words. And she loosened up, and it was much better. So there is a fear out there as well.
Yeah, certainly. And I like to think of context. So in my world, I review lots of marketing content, or through Apex Compliance, my compliance software product. I'm helping customers understand key risky findings on their website, social media. So let's say there's a blog and it's talking about acupuncture and meditation for depression. Now, depression, that's one of the no words, but in that context, right, it's fine, right? They're not using it to sell a product or an ingredient or a constituent in it, but kind of where the landmines, I guess, lie with in a made up blog like that would be, oh, and by the way, we have St. John's wort. So it could be a blog about depression, no word, meditation, acupuncture, deep breathing, whatever it may be. That's all good. But then the kind of kicker at the end of that blog or that post would be, and by the way, we have St. John's wort. This kind of takes this educational blog and totally transforms it into a piece of marketing. I also see that on social media. Sometimes if there might be an educational post about depression, I'm just going to stay with depression awareness, right? Companies are allowed to support whatever they want, or breast cancer awareness. But if the company wrote hashtag their ingredient name in that post, they'd take an otherwise compliant post and ding, 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 cross the line and get super risky, as an example.
And that's good. This is really good clarity because we need to think it through a little bit. Sometimes I watch social media and some of the platforms. I think to myself, I hear people, I it's a landmine out there to use your word, because there are people that are saying things out there. Number one, they have no history, they have no accolades, they have no studies, they have no school, and they are basically just laying it on the line out there. And I think to myself, number one, it's not right. It's not correct. It's not even legal. Number two, how many people are going to jump on this thinking that it is medical advice coming their way from someone who is credible? And how many people are going to run out and buy whatever they're talking about because maybe desperation, maybe frustration, maybe they've been unsuccessful. But where do we cross the line with that, and how does that get regulated?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these $100 million plus companies that I've never even heard of, or you've heard of, right? And we know the industry. We've been in the industry most of our lives, and these are companies that are scaling, scaling, scaling. And are they using compliant marketing practices? I don't know. Maybe not. Probably, maybe they don't know any better in many cases. So they might be using influencers, or I think in your example, to take it a step further and add some context to it, let's say there's a brand that had a social media post or an ad with a doctor in a doctor's outfit, a stethoscope around their neck. Now that's an implied medical claim, right? So if their person wasn't a doctor, then that's unethical, right? That'd be considered misleading. But if it was the context of a doctor or someone that looks like a doctor talking about an ingredient, maybe they had the EKG symbol. We're all aware of that little EKG symbol on their product label. Maybe they'd have clinically proven over here. Maybe they'd have a testimonial that talked about arthritis over here. It incrementally just increases the risk over a little bit at a time. There's not usually one thing that tips the scale unless it's really over the top, like a COVID claim or something, but they all just kind of incrementally add to that risk. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or if it added in some context, but I thought it was fun to get that point across.
No, it does. And, I just wonder, do these ever get to the point when they are lawful and enforceable? I mean, where they can really get themselves in a miss?
Oh yeah, all the time. I think that there are companies that are strategic, or maybe they're not strategic and they're just getting lucky. But there's a lot of companies that go kind of middle of the road claims. If they're going to push it, they may push it with influencers. TikTok, right, as a channel. I like TikTok, but TikTok's actually never been cited or referenced in any FDA warning letter ever. I'm so surprised about that. So TikTok's
Wow.
this whole other world. So there's companies that are kind of weaving the navigation of how to not stay under the radar, because if you market online, you're on FDA's radar, you're on the plaintiff attorney's radar, but they're not really sure, or they're not really pushing it enough. So they might be talking about bloating or joint health and maybe adding some implied clinically proven claims. That might attract litigation, but that on its own is probably not enough to attract the warning letter. But to answer your question, there certainly is enforcement. There is a national advertising division that challenges companies, and with monitoring cases, or competitors can challenge each other. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, brings cases from time to time. They have a lot of teeth, so they choose their cases wisely, and then they dig in. You don't want to do that, but they tend to go after the companies that are really icky, kind of pushing it. Of course, FDA, they send out warning letters almost every week. Sometimes they're to dietary supplement or CPG product companies, and they're going after companies that are really kind of like making those disease claims or adulterating their products with ibuprofen and not putting it on the label, or using dangerous kratom products and putting it in gummies for kids or something like that. So in this enforcement world, you kind of have to push it to get in trouble with the FDA or FTC. But of course, there's a 9 million pound gorilla, the plaintiff attorneys. So I don't necessarily want to give them more credit than I don't necessarily want to shine a creditable light on them. But they do, I don't know if they keep the industry honest, but they do take bites out of companies left and right. So if a company is making an all natural claim or no artificial flavors or made in the USA or anything like that on the label, this is an example of low hanging fruit for demand letter or lawsuit. So long winded way of saying, yes, there is enforcement. And I like watching the enforcement trends because there's always a constant. So high risk claims, cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, PTSD, those are always going to be high risk. But there are other enforcement trends that come up and down and up and down. So watching those enforcement trends with the FDA is really interesting because let's say these companies are listening to us today. They can learn from what other companies are getting in trouble for and then adjust their marketing and stay ahead of the enforcement curve. You've taken all the listeners and viewers out there, you've taken a bite of the forbidden fruit. Now you know, so you can help you understand what those enforcement trends are and then adjust your marketing. So hopefully keep you out of a warning letter category.
Well, when I was on the air, I was on the radio for a long time. We had FTC guidelines. You couldn't use profanity and a lot of stuff like that. Same thing with television. I think there's a lot of misinformation saying that with social media and with podcasting and stuff like that, there are no laws. Everything is open. You can say what you want, do what you want, and all that stuff. And I think there is that mentality that is running out there very strong. And I think to myself sometimes, no, but it's there nonetheless.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know that I like to think about super fans and brands. So sometimes if I'm a brand, and maybe this will add a little bit of color to this aspect of the discussion, but if I'm a brand and I'm talking about my product or someone that I pay, an influencer or an ambassador is talking about my product, that's labeling. We're responsible for that. Even if they are a micro influencer and they received a free product, we have a level of responsibility. But let's say there's a super fan for Kokora and they love this product and they're just posting about it and Kokora has not provided them any free samples or discount codes. They're super fans. We love super fans, right? They can say essentially whatever they want. But then us as the brand, our commercial bridge, if then Kokora liked their post, said thanks, reposted it, that's that kind of commercial bridge of where we have to kind of say whatever you want on social media as a consumer. And then is this kind of commercial speech?
Oh, see, I like that. Well, that's a category that, I think a lot of people forget that there's a lot of layers to this, and there's a lot of languages within the language. It's how things are said, how they're related, how you apply them, what you reference, how you reference. It's not like we have to be totally overwhelmed, but I think we need to remember that there are just some basic things to definitely keep in mind. And if you do that, you'll usually be right. And if you try to skirt the issue, there's a good chance you're going to be wrong. So I think it's quite interesting. I've seen a lot of change in the verbiage out there. I remember when I was starting very, very young in the industry, the word cure was used all the time. Cure, everywhere. And all the mentors that I had way back 40 some odd years ago, they loosely used it, but there really wasn't a policing. There really wasn't an overseeing entity, if you will. And there was a lot of crazy, because I remember doing radio, 40 some odd years ago, and I would have guests on. And now I think back and I just cringe some of the things that they were so freely saying, because those words would never come out of my mouth. And I felt awkward at the time. So I think we are getting a little better, but I do think friendly reminders, and I think you being doing what you're doing and being visible and, just giving people the nudges, in the right direction to make sure that they're aware. Because I think it is an awareness.
It is. It's awareness. It's a forbidden fruit, as I like to call it. And let's just say that there's a company that was making lots of claims, or they were on podcasts or videos and it's attached to their shopping cart of their brand in some way. It's never too late. Companies and everyone out there today, you can clean up your stuff. So if the FDA, for example, is looking at your website and then you remove the disease claims, the next time they look at the website, if they're gone, they're probably not going to cite you for that. So it's never too late until you get the warning letter. And as a friendly reminder, a 10-year-old social media post or blog post is considered active marketing in the eyes of the agency. Even if, for in your example, if there was a podcast from 40 years, a radio program recording from 40 years ago, if that was hosted or archived on a website, that's considered marketing. So we'd want to think about a way to either remove the disease, the trigger words, that's the first step, or just simply remove it altogether. There hasn't been a lot of enforcement of podcasts in particular, other than during COVID. Whenever I'm looking at anything and it has that March, April, May of 2020 on a regular thing, I cringe. I'm like, oh no, what are we getting ourselves in for? But it was right around that time a company got a warning letter, and if I'm remembering correctly, for hosting the podcast transcript on their website. And in that podcast transcript, they're talking about COVID and ingredients, whatever products, whatever it may be. So that was considered marketing or labeling. So that's how I've seen people get in trouble with podcasts, as long as they're not super cross-linking. Like, hey, I was on this podcast talking about ashwagandha and depression. If I was a brand selling ashwagandha, that'd be pushing it, for example.
Well, I think that once you kind of get in the groove and you start to learn some of those words that you could interject or insert in rather than, I think it becomes a lot easier. At the beginning, it just feels like you're walking barefooted on Lego across the floor, and you're just kind of like, you're like uncomfortable, unseasoned, just uninformed. But I think it does get better because I read a lot of the things that you post, and I read a lot of the things that you do, and a lot of the things that you're doing out there. And I've learned things. I've had many aha moments, and I'm just like, oh, okay, all right. Didn't think that. Now I do. Now I get it. Committed to the brain. And as I'm venturing and hosting and doing other podcasts and guesting, if someone throws that my way, I usually point it out to them after, for their own benefit, not as a being critical or anything, just being informing, because I was informed. So I kind of pass it on because we kind of work together as an industry. And I do see a lot of that. And that's very promising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are stronger together.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll do cold outreach to companies saying, hey, I found all these depression claims on your product page. 1 out of 20 actually appreciate it, but then the other 19 are like, who are you? What are you trying to sell me? It's well intentioned, but I do believe in the rising tide approach of like, hey, let's all educate each other, let's help support each other, let's help each other have those light bulb moments that you just talked about. And of course, I'm a pretty gentle, I have a gentle hand with these type of things, so I'd rather kind of lightly imply it in my own personal style. That's why I like writing Warning Letter Wednesday and talking and public speaking, and then just like you said, after the fact, say, I did see something that you might want to look at because it can get you in trouble. I know not everyone in the industry has that approach, but I think you and I are aligned that we like being kind, nice, but also really helpful. If we do that, everything will work out, right? I hope.
Well, I have a friend, a teacher that I had in college, and she said, getting your point across is very important. Sometimes doing it with an iron hand while wearing a silk glove will get you a lot more attention and respect because you're there and you're supporting the person. You're not just slapping them with the iron hand. And I've always liked that. I like a gentler approach. And sometimes the approach is maybe more of a learning or an education, because most of the things that I've learned, I mean, let's just face it, I'm old. I've been around a long time, and we all trip, we all stumble, we all hit hurdles. And sometimes we learn from them. Sometimes we keep hitting the same ones over and over because maybe we're not reaching out. Maybe we're not researching the correct way to do something. And we may have to fall a few times. Eventually, I think we get it. But, I think there's nothing better than having somebody that's there in your court, not trying to ridicule, but trying to support and uplift you and maybe give you some tools that work.
Yeah, I love that. It's hard to find. So I think our advice is if you help build your network, everyone out there. If you feel like you're sailing alone, come to the trade shows, come to the events, stop by, see us, and add us to your network. We're all here to support each other for sure.
That's very, very true. Do the same stipulations apply to written literature and also to labels on the products themselves? I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking about written literature, educational blog posts, product pages, handouts at trade shows, yeah, without a doubt. I don't know how often the FDA goes to trade shows nowadays, but they certainly did in the past. And I do know I've helped oversee 3 FDA GMP inspections when I was in the manufacturing world, but no 483s. So that's a good thing. By the way, it's a really lucky, cool thing. But FDA, when they come in your facility, if they see literature, it's fair game. They'll if they see a brochure, they'll consider that to be labeling and marketing. So written literature, certainly that's fair game for enforcement. Labeling, without a doubt. I mean, labeling is labeling. It is exactly what needs to be ultra compliant, not only from an FDA point of view, but plaintiff attorneys, interestingly enough, they tend to focus most of their attention on what's actually on the package, on the label, whereas they definitely don't focus as much as what's on the secondary, the carousel, the website, the social posts, that type of thing. So labels, especially when we're talking about litigation prevention, yeah, we want to be extra super careful with them.
I have something to ask you that I've been wondering about, and it's called label extension. And it is basically where I remember going up through the ranks, we would have a pile of literature pamphlets next to a product. Now, that was years ago. And now I've heard that you can't do that. Can you clarify? People ask me all the time, and I said, I know who I want to ask.
Okay, so label extension. This would be physically, virtually, a little bit of both. Okay. Well, when DSHEA was enacted, there's something called the reading room, right? Where you have the supplements and then you have the books or the literature about the supplement, kind of adjacent, that type of thing. And I like to think of it as kind of the gut feeling. So if let's start off by saying there's no such thing as a 2-click rule at all. It doesn't exist, but it's a good parameter, right? The farther away from the product shopping cart, actual product, a claim is, the better, the less likely it is to be scrutinized. But really, as a consumer, and FDA investigators or plaintiff attorneys, for the most part, they are consumers. If they look at something, are they is a reasonable consumer going to think this is considered marketing or this is not considered marketing? So kind of having that gut feeling approach. I asked my wife, my mother-in-law and father-in-law are staying with me right now. I might ask them, hey, what do you think about this, to kind of get their sense of, do they think this is marketing? What is a reasonable consumer? That's a real term. What do they think about this? So I don't know if that's what you were asking. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just something I've wondered about, because I was very overjoyed when DSHEA came through. That was a very huge rendering, and so many people worked on that, and that was a huge milestone for the industry. Because I think a lot of times people still think we have no regulations, we have no testing, we don't know what we're doing. It's a snake oil season. So, there are so many rules and regulations and standards and things that are associated with this industry. And I don't think a lot of people know. And I think a lot of people just, maybe just think we kind of fly by the seat of our pants. But there's some amazing things that we have in place that can actually make a big difference for the consumer's safety.
Yes, absolutely. Adverse event reporting, I think, is one of the core tenets of that. That is, when you look at a dietary supplement or other type of label, it has contact information on there. That's so the consumer can report an adverse event. Then when the FDA comes in, and this is kind of the regime or the scheme, when the FDA comes into a facility, they'll want to look at those adverse event and those customer complaint logs. There's the labeling. The customer is supposed to report the adverse event or the serious adverse event to the brand or the company. FDA kind of rules by oversight every time they come in. It's one of the first things they'll ask. let me see your complaint log. Have those been investigated properly? And then if they are a serious adverse event, such as hospitalization, serious medical intervention, have those been reported to FDA in the proper amount of time? That's kind of the safety angle, in particular dietary supplements. And I think it works really good. I mean, if there is a unreputable company, they're not going to follow any of these rules anyway. But the disreputable companies, there's very few of them, right? But they make a big splash. But all the reputable companies are following all these type of rules: adverse event reporting, serious adverse event reporting, that type of thing. So that's one of the areas of safety. I mean, certainly, again, GMPs, good manufacturing practices. I like to joke, get more paper is also what GMP stands for, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. I wrote a Warning Letter Wednesday post recently about that, where a company said, hey, we did it, but they didn't prove that they did it by writing it down. So that could certainly lead to issues. But when FDA comes in for a GMP inspection, they're going to want to not only verify, are the investigations properly done for adverse events, but have you identity tested your product? Does it have microbial? Does it have heavy metals? Is it blended properly? You say there's 100 milligrams of vitamin C at the end of expiration. How are you proving that? So the kind of rule by oversight, I live in Colorado. We have hawks here and ospreys, beautiful birds. And I like to think of FDA kind of as these big birds that they just cruise around. They're always there, and you never know when they're going to drop into your facility. So essentially they rule by oversight. And brands, the kind of mantra is, what would the FDA think if? And being ready for that as part of a healthy ecosystem of quality and manufacturing.
I'm glad you didn't call them vultures. I kind of like the hawks, and that was a little better. That was a nice toned down version.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of people in the FDA that I really like, and I think they're doing their best. They're very under resourced, of course, right now especially. But yeah, I've never thought about calling them that bird, but that's funny. I'm glad I didn't. That would have been bad.
I think it's wonderful that you didn't, because I that's just another great respect from you. Thank you. I think one of the two worst times for terrible misinformation was, of course, COVID. But I think another bad one was CBD. And I was part of that actual original launch at Expo, and it was like out of the blue, there was like 3,000 CBD companies, and not all good players. Nobody really, a lot of them not following any standards of any kind. You know, people were making it in their garages and their kitchens, and so I'm glad that kind of either under demand regulated itself or regulated itself just because, but that was a very weird time. There was some crazy stuff coming out at that time.
Yeah, so true. I still chair the American Herbal Products Association's Cannabis Committee. I think I've been doing it for 6 years. I'm sunsetting that, handing the reins to someone else. And then I'm actually picking up as the American Herbal Products Association's new chair of the Technology and AI Innovation Committee. But I've been working in hemp cannabinoids for quite a while, or I did back in the Green Rush days. But yeah, that was very bizarre. I think, of course, cannabinoids can be really great. Can they heal everybody of everything? Of course not, but they certainly play a role as holistic health. And as we look at enforcement, to kind of drill down on the cannabinoid CBD world, is most of the enforcement has to do with companies that are making Delta 8 and other intoxicating isomer products in formats that are favorable to children. 1,500 milligram Delta 8 chocolate bars. Like, come on. Like,
yeah, really.
That would definitely ruin my day, and it would be very dangerous for a kid. Or CBD companies there was one earlier this year where it was an injectable CBD. It's like, come on, that's weird. There's ophthalmic, so eye drop CBD products that maybe didn't go through the proper amount of testing. So that's not a lot of enforcement with cannabinoid type products, except for the ones that are way over the top. But that's probably, I think, to your point, because there's just a lot less products than there used to be back in 2019, 2020, and so on.
It was I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Being in the industry a long time, we've seen a lot. We saw the melatonin explosion, the ginkgo biloba explosion, even back to like fish oil and flaxseed oil and
Yeah, or
all that.
noni. Noni is
Oh,
another one from way back in the day.
yeah. Red raspberry ketones. I mean, we saw a whole bunch of stuff and but I never saw anything like the CBD explosion. I mean, I went to Expo the next year and every single booth had CBD. I mean, it was just like wish I had $1 for every CBD 3-letter word that was used at that show that year. But our shows do have a tendency to follow the trends, and understandably. But that was just, I still shake my head at it because it was like overwhelming.
It was so wild. And you're right. I think there was a lot of well-intentioned true believers. Of course, people that wanted to make a quick buck obviously infiltrated and came in, but a lot of it had to do with, Charlotte's Web and their mission to help, support people, kids with horrible seizure disease and Dravet's and things like that. So that was kind of the leader that we could all certainly get behind. But then a lot of the true believers that came into the cannabinoid space didn't understand the nuance of, hey, what works in a pilot study does not translate into compliant marketing. If CBD was studied for COVID, doesn't mean that you can put that in your product marketing. So that's why we saw dozens and dozens and dozens of warning letters, especially in that 2019, 2020 time period.
Well, I want to thank you so much. This is something I've been looking forward to, and like I said, I'm a huge fan. I love what you do, and I think you're an absolutely incredible person in this industry. And I think what you bring to the plate is caring and coming from a place of goodness. Not coming from anything other than that. And informing people and helping to lead them and educating, which you do so well. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. Second of all, I'm going to ask you if you'll come back and see me again.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I was really looking forward to this interview as well, to this discussion. And as I mentioned before we hit record, about an hour before this talk, I was frolicking in a dahlia farm right down the road. Our friends have an organic farm here in Colorado. So that's how I help set the tone for this conversation, is flower picking and eating organic raspberries off the bush. Life is really good. So thank you so much for those kind words. Of course, I'd be more than happy to come back, continue the discussions. I know that when we got to hang in Orlando, a little bit ago, that was so fun. So yeah, I look forward to continuing our chats together, my friend.
Now, the hard part. 2 questions. The first one is, leave us with a thought of the day on any topic you like.
Okay, so the thought of the day is, I'm an entrepreneur. Many of us are. We're all entrepreneurs in our own respect. And the entrepreneur journey is really tough. So I like starting the day with a meditation mantra that goes like this: today is a beautiful day of opportunity. I am exactly where I need to be. I open myself to the universe and trust in the unfolding of my life. Yes, I'm super woo woo, but I like it. So that's my thought. It's been, it's kind of in the back of my head throughout the day. Take a deep breath, chill out. It's all happening. Just be nice and work hard, and things tend to work out. So I don't know. I don't know what other people say to that question, but that's what was top of mind for me.
No, I love it. It's beautiful. Question number 2. If you were to leave the planet today, what would you want to be remembered for?
I'd want to be remembered for, well, one of the fun things about this conversation is I didn't prepare. I didn't know we were going to talk about this, so I didn't prepare anything. So this is totally this is unfiltered Asa here. I'd want to be remembered for being a kind person that was helpful.
I love it. I love it. That says
I
it
got
all.
one more. Kind person that was helpful, that also helped think creatively about problems. So I'm certainly not a square peg in a square hole person. And that's really, throughout my life, that's helped me think way differently about other things. So the journey to success or happiness, it's not linear, it's not straight. But if you don't fit into kind of the mainstream way of doing things, it's extra hard, but then the reward's extra good. It's whatever day of the week it is. And I was frolicking in a dahlia farm an hour ago. It's because I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning and meditated and did a lot of work and thought creatively about that. So that's less of a soundbite, but I also wanted to share that too.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. I hope everybody enjoyed this today as much as I did. My guest today, Asa Waldstein. You can follow him on LinkedIn. You can search him out, his speakings, his teaching, his education, his just everything about him is a supportive module of who he is and what he does for this amazing industry. I appreciate you all being here today. Remember, go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and remember, the whole idea of this show is to talk about all the things that have to do with good health and well-being from inside and outside the natural products industry, because it's all about learning. It doesn't matter where you learn it from, as long as you're learning something every single day. Asa, thank you for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
Be well, everyone. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.